A History of Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas by William Monks, published in 1907. The Kuklux, Part 2, number 54. On the same day that Captain Simpson Mason was assassinated in Fulton County, Kuklux attempted to assassinate Governor Clayton in Little Rock. They were seen in considerable numbers near the state capitol after night, all wearing masks. They notified the governor that they intended to capture and take possession of the state capitol by a force, if he did not resign his office as governor. The danger became so great that he barricaded the state house, as he had but few state troops. The whole state was invaded by the Kuklux at the same time, and they commenced raiding the state in bands from 25 to 250 men. All wore masks and large rubber pouches concealed by a cover. They visited the Union men and colored men's houses and raided the whole country generally, proclaiming that they were dead rebels who had been shot on the different battlefields during the Civil War, and that they had come back to rid the state of black Republicans and carpetbaggers. They would claim that they were very thirsty, that they had never had a drink of water since they had been killed at the battles of Gettysburg, Corinth, Vicksburg, and other big battles. They would call on the colored people to bring them a bucketful, and one of their number would pour the whole bucketful into his pouch and call for more water, making the colored people believe that they drank the water. Then they would give the colored people orders not to be called off their plantations, and if so caught, the penalty of death would be inflicted. Many of the influential colored people were shot down. The author saw a number of fresh graves of the colored people that had been shot by the Kuklux, saw holes in windows in houses and towns and villages that had been shot through after night, while men were reading, who had been notified to resign their offices or stop using their influence in favor of the enforcement of the civil law. The author remembers passing some colored people on the side of the road. One old colored woman cried out at the top of her voice, "Lord, massa, are you men hunting down them dark Kuklux? Well, Dot told us that bullets wouldn't kill them. I thought we could fight live men, but when it come to fighting dead men, don't know what to think about it. When they come to our house, rode up to the fence, called for water, said they hadn't any water since the Battle of Shiloh. Well, one man drank a bucketful and then called for more. I thought to my soul that they would never get enough water." The author replied, "Auntie, when these rebels are killed, they never get back here. The bad man keeps them to build fires for him. These Kuklux are the men that ran away from the Battle of Shiloh and have just crawled out of their dens. That's why they are masked." The old woman said, "That's what I thought about it." While the Kuklux were raiding the country, they visited an old darky's house and gave him 3 days' notice to leave the country. And if he failed to leave, they would visit him again, and death would be his penalty. In about 3 or 4 days, 25 or 30 Kuklux rode up to his cabin in the night and called for him. He was armed with an old U.S. musket. He fired into the crowd and killed one of the band, and then ran and made his escape. Part of the regiment received orders to report to General Upham, who was stationed at Cotton Plant on White River, leaving Captain Richardson in charge of the forces in Fulton County and Captain Toney in charge of the troops in Izard and Sharp counties. The regiment broke camp and marched by way of Jacksonport, and on their arrival went into camp on the Waddle Farm, 2 miles below Jacksonport. The Kuklux had declared that we should not march through Jacksonport. A brother-in-law, Mr. Waddle, from North Missouri, invited the rider to supper. The rider, believing that a trap had been fixed to decoy him outside of the lines, took one lieutenant and a posse of men and went to his house. On our arrival, we found a bountiful supper, Had everything that a hungry man could wish. Had eggnog served in silver cups with silver spoons. The residence was about 42 by 20 feet. 2 large rooms with a 10-foot hall between, with kitchen on west side, fine portico with about 10 or 12 Negro cabins, about 60 to 100 feet from the dwelling house. Just before supper, I noticed 8 or 10 men come in on foot dressed in gray clothing. I at once ordered my men to be ready at any moment, and to not let them get the drop on them. Just about the time that most of my men were through eating supper, I noticed that some of the men that came into the supper table had arms on their persons, and noticed that the niggers were excited. I stepped out at a back door, and just as I entered the hall door, I saw the landlord approaching the room where my men were seated at the table with a navy pistol cocked in his right hand, holding it behind his back. Just as he attempted to open the door where my men were seated at the supper table, I sprang forward and grabbed his pistol and wrenched it out of his hand and said to him, "Don't you dare to attempt to shoot one of my men." He turned around facing me and said, "I went all through the Civil War, and you are the first men that ever disarmed me." In a moment, my men had pistols in hand ready for action, and I noticed some of the men that came dressed in gray had pistols in their pockets. I remarked to them, "I came here on an invitation. I am here as a guest. I wish to treat all persons as gentlemen, especially the landlord and his family, but this hostile move made upon the part of the landlord and the presence of these armed men shows me that there is something wrong." I ordered my men to fall in line and return to the camp. His wife appeared to be a perfect lady, and her husband appeared to be under the influence of whiskey. He agreed that if I would release him, he would go into his room and stay there until my men had all returned to the camp. After he had gone into his room, I gave his revolver to his wife on her promising not to give it to him until the next morning. I learned from Mr. Waddle's brother-in-law that he came from northern Missouri at the commencement of the war, and about the close of the war he married his sister. That he was a Cyclops and came to Fulton County in the Kuklux raid, and that the men who came that evening were all Ku Klux. That if I had gone alone to his supper, I would have been killed. The next morning we broke camp and resumed our march. On the regiment arriving at Cotton Plant, Colonel Dale reported to General Upham, and we were ordered into camp. As soon as the citizens of the city learned of my arrival, they requested General Upham that I be invited to deliver a speech in the city hall. That they had heard and read of Colonel Monks, and they wanted him to deliver an address to the people at early candlelight on the present condition of the state. There were about 700 or 800 men stationed at the post. After supper, the adjutant sent an order by an orderly to detail about 50 men for a patrol guard. That the soldiers had broken into the warehouse and were taking out whiskey and other articles. I ordered the detail to be made and reported headquarters for further orders. Our headquarters were not more than 40 yards from the warehouse. I spoke in an audible voice. "Now, we claim that our mission as soldiers is to protect persons and property. I want you to see that your guns and pistols are well loaded, and go direct to the warehouse first and arrest all soldiers that you find in or about the warehouse, and take them to the guardhouse, and there keep them safe until further orders, and patrol the city closely. Order all soldiers and officers who have not passes to be inside of their quarters in 30 minutes. And if you find any soldiers on the street after 30 minutes, arrest them and take them to the guardhouse. If they resist you, shoot them. And if you have to shoot, shoot to kill." About that time, some man near the warehouse called out, "Who in hell are you? This whiskey is Ku Klux whiskey, and we will take what we please." I replied, "If we cannot enforce discipline over the soldiers, we will go back home and send others. You will find out who I am if you wait until the patrol gets here." I ordered the officer to sound the reveille. Inside of 30 minutes, every soldier was inside of his quarters. The citizens said that such a thing had not occurred since the post had been established. Captain Sharp was reckless when drinking. He had mutinied, and the men that were disposed to be wild had terrorized the people of the city. General Upham had failed to enforce discipline over Captain Sharp and his company. Captain Sharp had ridden up and down the streets before the regiment had arrived and proclaimed, "When Colonel Monks arrives, we will clean all the Kuklux up." The citizens were considerably frightened on my arrival in August, but after they saw how completely I enforced discipline, everything became quiet. They appeared to be perfectly secure in person and property. On the next night, at early candlelight, the large hall was filled. After being introduced by General Upham, I spoke, in part, as follows. Gentlemen and fellow citizens of Arkansas, I am from your sister state, Missouri, and I am very sorry to find you people in a state of war. War is not very pleasant. It has its effects upon society, demoralizes the morals of the people, besides the great sacrifice of life and property. Besides this, it alienates those who should be brethren and makes them bitter enemies. Your people may ask the question, what right have you Missourians to come down into our state? My first answer will be, Captain Simpson Mason was but recently assassinated in Fulton County near the state line, while in the discharge of his official duty. At the commencement of the Civil War, he was a citizen of Fulton County, Arkansas, and I was a citizen of Howell County, Missouri. Both of us were unconditional Union men. Both of us were driven from our homes, and posses of men from your state, regardless of the state line, scattered our county, murdering and driving out Union men, women, and children, and hung and shot down loyal men. Captain Mason and I met in the early part of the War of the Rebellion and soon became fast friends. Served together during the war. When peace was made, we determined to go back home. Men would meet us and say, "If you men go back among the old rebels who hate you so badly they will kill you," our reply would be, "Damn a man that is afraid to go back and enjoy the fruits of his victory." We met and pledged our sacred honor to each other that if, after our return to our old homes, either one of us was killed by the late rebels, the other would do all in his power to bring the guilty parties to justice. A better and truer man never lived than Captain Simpson Mason. Each of us came back with the olive leaf in his mouth. Now, I don't say that all rebels are Kuklux, but I will say all Kuklux have been late rebels and have organized a secret organization, the objects and aims of which are to overturn the civil government of your state by murder and intimidations through the most vile and desperate means known to man, the savage not excepted. Besides, your organization extends into the border counties of Missouri, and as the rebels thought right to cross the state line during the Civil War, we think it right to cross it now, to help our loyal brethren, and these are the causes that brought us to your state. We don't want booty. We want to see the civil law enforced, and we ask your cooperation and promise you that all law-abiding citizens, be they Union or Rebel, shall be protected in person and property during our stay in your state, and we intend to enforce the very strictest discipline among our troops. I hope by the cooperation of the people of your state, this unholy war will soon cease. At the conclusion of the speech, they gave 3 cheers for Missouri troops.